Incremental greetings. This is the fifth section of the Pleasurable guide to SuperMemo, the Fluency cycle, elements and cues. So, in SuperMemo, everything is an element. We will introduce what it is, the types there are, the states, and so on. Some of them in more detail than others, because some are just, okay, I'm just letting you know this exists, but we're not going to cover that at all until the mastery track, or just anecdotically. Then the cues. There are multiple cues in SuperMemo, unlike other software that you only will have one to use the space repetition. In SuperMemo there are many. And we will finish with a SuperMemo commander, because it's a thing that we will need to do and we will use from now on for other features. So it always is presented in a sequence to guarantee, hey, I have seen this already in the right order. So by the end of the section, you will be able to understand all of the elements, how they work, more or less, why they exist, the purpose of them, and the cues. Some of the cues with more depth than others, but you will have at least an overview. Let's start the section then. So you may have noticed that I said elements at some point already. What are elements, right? Could be the case that if you come from a space repetition software, you know flashcards. Okay. Here, flashcard is one type of element. It's also not called flashcard, it's called item. For instance, what you see here with the bulb, this is a concept. Then what you see here with the T, it's called a topic. And if I go to learn, this is an item. And you also have something else. You also have tasks. Here you go, with the engine icon. So long story short, there are 4 element types: items, topics, concepts, and tasks. We will see what are those, what do they have different, how they behave, and the reasoning, why you have 4 different types and not just 2 or 10. So then, everything you see here on my left side, this is called the knowledge tree. Everything in SuperMemo is an element. So items are elements, concepts are elements, tasks are elements, and topics are elements. Are just different element types. So everything in your collection that is here, represented in the knowledge tree, with the hierarchy and so on, it will be an element. So when my collection says that I have, let's see, 64,824 elements, refers to all of this. And then I can know that, 21,518 are items. The rest will be topics, tasks, or concepts. It doesn't tell you how many concepts you have or tasks. It just tells you topics, but topics is including everything. If you see the information on hover, number of topics, concepts, and tasks. Why? Because it's everything else that is not a flashcard, basically. It's this division. Flashcard, active recall, and passive review. Tasks, concepts, and topics are passive review. This distinction will also happen in the stats, that you can fine-tune only items or everything, stuff like that. So those are elements. Now that we know what is an element, and we also know this is the element window, basically the element window displays the element. Duh, right? Easy. So in this case I have different what's called components arrayed with a template. Nice. So any element has what's called an element menu. If I right click, here you go. Do you see learning concepts, priority, all of this? It's called the element window. Then if it's a task, it's the same. I right click and I get the same menu. If it's a topic, I right click and I get the same menu. Easy, right? Then on here where it says the name of the collection, I can also right click. It's a safe place. Imagine that I have a lot of stuff here that I cannot get empty area. I will go here and right click. Or if I go to edit, menus, and the element menu, which I can also press Alt F10. You get the same thing, the same menu. We will be using this menu a lot. There will be many videos because you cannot even comprehend how many menus there are, or even sub menus. Some options more convenient and common than others, like email. You're not going to use this, more likely. That's the element window. Why? Because that's the element menu. And why this is relevant is because there are different menus. Just to make my point here, do you see? Hey, we have more menus. We are just tackling the first one, the element menu. So now we know what the menu is. We're going to use it quite a lot in this course. What is a collection? You may have heard already, oh, my SuperMemo collection, in this collection, oh, I'm using a backup of my collection, and so on. Here's the official documentation about the collection. So, loading material used in SuperMemo. Okay, it's too broad, doesn't tell me much. A collection is made of single pieces of knowledge called elements. So what you see in the knowledge tree, that are folders and whatever, there's some nesting, some hierarchy of elements. All of those elements under the root, in my case, Pleasurable learning, this forms the collection. Then the collection is those single pieces of knowledge with elements that will be different element types and so on, and something else. There's a bunch of settings and some other stuff and stats that make this collection. If you're an Anki user, for you will be more or less the same in Anki as a profile. A profile has one collection, even though the collection can have any arbitrary number of decks. In SuperMemo, it will be more a hybrid between a deck and a profile, if this makes sense. Then a collection of a given name is stored in a folder directory that bears the same name. All of important statistical and learning data. Exactly. Why learning data? Because each collection will have their own version of the algorithm. It's adapting because the algorithm, the space repetition algorithm in SuperMemo, adapts to the performance of the user. If I have different collections, even if I am the same user, I will have different optimized versions of the algorithm. Let's say that I have a specific collection for Chinese. It's harder. The algorithm will adapt to that. Then it has the same name, yes. The name of the collection will be the same of the extension. We will see that later. And just to let you know that in other SuperMemos, they were called knowledge systems or databases. So, since existence to number SuperMemo 7, it was a SuperMemo database. In SuperMemo 8, it was knowledge systems, only on that version. And from SuperMemo 9 to 19, so any other SuperMemo is just called collection. Then we will see in this section the parameters, some of the settings. You can have multiple collections. What are the main components of a collections, like queues and all of this. So now that we know what is a collection in SuperMemo, we can introduce a collection chooser or picker. If we go to the element window, the main menu, file, and even if we cover open collection or new collection, here we have the directory. Then SuperMemo in the middle screen will list the collections it detects, is detecting in this folder. Now it's systems. And on the right section of the screen is more or less telling you a few options, a few characteristics of this collection. Not everything, just enough to know, yeah, that's the collection I meant to. Could be this case that I have just 1 year off, or perhaps is a backup, so you have an opportunity to detect, oh, sorry, that was the backup, it's not my main collection, it's this one. Now I know it because the color has changed. The background color, now it's yellow. In this case, it tells you why. because it's already open, currently opened. Because in SuperMemo, just to let you know, if you really want, you can have multiple collections open in parallel at the same time if you really want it. So there's no strict need to switch back and forth. Then we will see other colors there are. There are like 8 different colors about this, only for the mastery track. Just to let you know that if you see something a different color, it's some kind of error, a different SuperMemo version. You can see that here. It's older or it's newer, you cannot open it, or there's some kind of error. Other than that, you don't need anything else. We have already seen the total elements, the number of out of which, how many there are items, 41,000 topics, tasks, and concepts, by the way, anything that is not an item. Memorized, burden, we haven't seen burden yet, forgetting index, and stuff like that. First day, last day. If you ask me, what you should take a look at is the name of the collection and the last day, if you have backups. Or when I open this for the very last time, and that's about it. If I have this, for instance, it's a different color because it says, hey, that's from SuperMemo 16. And it's in this place. I can navigate and go. In my case, I will go to a different backup. I have many. And here I have other collections. And even here as well. Those are more or less the same collections as before, but from a different backup. So they are slightly older. So it could be that the count is actually lower. Or it's different. For instance, I have even more topics before than now. So this is the collection chooser. The preview is optional. You can untoggle this if you really want. I don't see why, but okay. Good to know that you can do it. And you can show hidden files. But usually the SuperMemo files are not hidden, so there's not much use. And if you use the other drive, you can do it here, like I do. And I have SuperMemo collection for English. And here you go. I can see, oh wow, I have a ton of elements here. The number of repetitions, the time you invested, more than 3 days, and stuff like that. But look at this. I haven't opened this backup since 2022. It's been a while. So now I know for sure that this is not the last backup I did. It's more or less the reasoning for this preview. And then if you really want, you just click it and you basically open the collection. The collection can be in virtually any place. Now let's introduce the element type of items. Items is nothing else than flashcards. Why are not called flashcards in SuperMemo? I don't know. Flashcards has been popularized later on, way later than SuperMemo. So SuperMemo already coined items and it stick with the same name, basically. Then, that is an item, that's a question, that's the answer, and now I can grade my recall. If I remembered the question, I will say that it was good or not. And if I lapse it, I will say, no, I totally forgot about that. So it's basically the same as a flashcard. It can also contain images, sound, and even scripts if you want. Scripts will be only covered in the and sound. They will be only covered on the mastery track. Just think that it's just a flashcard. But in SuperMemo, a flashcard has a lot more stuff. So you have interval and the next repetition, but you also have priority. You also have the forgetting index, because in SuperMemo, it's not collection, it's collection-wise, the desired forgetting index, but you can also fine-tune it per flashcard if you want. We will tackle this much later. Again, the concept that is set, and a template, and also a comment, and even the difficulty. You may have seen in the element data here that some metrics, they only exist for items. Why? Because items are the only active recall element type. Everything else, concepts, topics, and tasks, are passive review. So when you go also to the stats, you will see that sometimes you can choose memorized items and topics. Items are just items, and that's it. Unlike topics, that this is topics, tasks, and concepts. We will have a lot of videos about everything we have introduced, all of the metrics and properties of items, but for now it's enough for introducing the items. Remember, flashcards are items. Let's introduce what is the element type of a topic. So what is the T? Do you see it always has the T? In this case it's yellow. By default is green. Let me find one. Here you go, mushroom. That's a topic. In this case it's just an article from Wikipedia. Could be any text or a video or an audio. Doesn't have to be just text. And basically that's the flow of incremental reading. That's the start of the learning source, and everything is scheduled. The reading is also scheduled. So I will see this with repetitions. So the topic has priorities, has interval, repetitions, due date, the same as what a flashcard will have, but I don't recall. I don't rate my recall either. I don't have front-end question, it's just a text. It's what's called passive review because it's just reading. But in SuperMemo, in incremental learning, you can have the opposite flow, that I can actually write as well. So I can do full incremental writing, that I start with an empty topic and I write on that, or I modify the text of already existing topic. That's the beauty of SuperMemo. Then I can go to the parameters, and as we have seen, I have when is the next repetition, the priority there is, and all of other metrics that we will see later on. So remember, a topic is more or less the learning material in SuperMemo. Everything is there. Everything is inside SuperMemo. Why it's called a topic? It has been decided to be a topic. And remember, it's always a T. T stands for topic. Nice. Later on we will see, why this is yellow, what means to be yellow instead of green, and so on. But the default is green. Let's introduce the element type of a task. This will be their own section for the mastery track. So if you only do the fluent track, this video will be enough just to know that they exist, and that's it. So a task is more or less a topic on steroids. It's the same than a topic with more stuff. So if I go to this window, the element parameter window, do you see I have the element tab is the same as the concept, is the same as the topic. So you can see which concept is having set, which template is using, the comment, ordinal number, forgetting index, factor. We will see all of this in the upcoming section. So no worries. What's important is that there's a second tab for a task, and you say this task is from which task list. You have a description which is different from the what's in the content. In this case, it's the name itself task. You have the value, the time, the relationship of this, the maximum, the deadline function, half deadline if you want to do it, and so on. You can think this as a task, a to-do task of always, but within SuperMemo that gets scheduled. You can have this task as a to-do thing in the task list on top of having the task as an element where you can write about this task. If it's something ongoing, that you will do this incrementally. It's more or less the purpose of the task. It means that by definition, it's something finite. You will put an end of this, that, hey, it's complete. In the same manner that a topic, you will see, it's done, when more or less you have read everything, all of the contents. Then, since there are a lot of cons, because you have to use SuperMemo, so you cannot use the phone, you cannot sync online, the tasks, and so on. It's so inconvenient that I will only suggest to use tasks for meta reasons, something about SuperMemo itself or about your collection itself. That remains in SuperMemo, like Las Vegas. What happens in Las Vegas remains in Las Vegas, stays in Las Vegas. Same here. The tasks remains in SuperMemo. So that's it. Let's introduce the concepts, the element type of concept. So this is not the best example. If I go here, I have education and health, science, humanities, cognition, and so on. Those are concepts. You may have seen here in many videos, I have business and management. That is a concept. Again, a concept could be the same as a topic. You can write on it. Yes, it's usually not the case, but it's possible to do it. We will see that. This is not scheduled, not anymore. Nice. But it's possible to do. And you have the same priority, forgetting index, pam. Even can have a concept set. So a concept element can have another element to be set as a concept in the group. So element education and schooling could have humanities set if I wanted to. No worries. I'll cancel that. Then why it's useful? Because concepts will allow you to create the knowledge tree, to put some order into knowledge tree. They will allow you to have hierarchy. So when you import new learning material, all of this is about education. Skill refusal, truancy, hikomori, democratic education. So everything here is about education. Nice. On top of that, they will allow you to auto-apply templates or to have a certain default priority when you use it, and so on. We will see in detail the concepts. They have their own section of the course for both fluency and mastery, unlike tasks, that is mastery only. And it's a crucial part of incremental reading. They are not essential in the sense that you could use SuperMemo neglecting concepts, but if you want a good use of SuperMemo, you'll rely on concepts, unlike tasks that you could neglect that if you want, and use task management somewhere else, in Notion or whatever software you want to use for tasks. Nice. So that is all you need to know for now about the concepts. So from now on, when they are mentioned, and we still don't do the section of concepts, you know what we're referring to. It's always the light bulb. By default is orange. In my case, all of them now here are yellow. By the default, the background color is orange. So we have seen already the 4 element types in SuperMemo: topics, items, tasks, and concepts. So this will be more or less an overview to slightly perhaps go more in detail, but just to have the big picture. We have the primary purpose, the typical form that may have, the repetition in the behavior in the repetition. Okay, so what I decided just to focus on the 3 columns, and we will leave the 4th column, the analogy, on its own video. Let's dig into that. Let's start with the topic. It's for new information and passive review. You will be processing this passively. You do the repetitions, are called reviews, technically. They will be scheduled, yes, and growing, yes, but it's not a spaced repetition. Then, items are to strengthen the primary purpose is to strengthen memory of atomic knowledge through active recall, using a spaced repetition. But not because you have a spaced repetition, everything is covered. No, the user needs to do the active recall consciously and has to follow the rules or the principles of the knowledge formulation. But that is the purpose. You do it in an item form, a flashcard format, just to recall something you want to revisit. Could be something else, doesn't have to be a flashcard in the very abstract sense. A concept represents something of higher order of thinking, like an idea, and creates connections because you can link concepts. For instance, I have the concept of the SuperMemo course, for instance, or SuperMemo, incremental reading, spaced repetition, Zettelkasten, all of those are concepts. What about tasks? Tasks is the same as the task management. is to prioritize and manage actions and jobs to be done into future, incrementally in this case. What about the typical form? Topic usually are books, chapter books, articles, especially from the web, your own notes, messages from AI or images, YouTube videos are in a topic, and so on. Items are just question and answer, multiple close deletion, usually, but you also have multiple choice, even though it's not already that typical. But there's always a question. A concept has a name, defines something, and it's like a hub for linking, like a concept group, right? Everything relating to SuperMemo, everything relating to Zettelkasten, and all of that. And a task is just a description, a URL to visit, or an email to answer, an action to do. Item in the English sense, in the natural language, not in the keyword of SuperMemo. What about the repetition behavior? That's especially the case in SuperMemo. That's interesting. A topic is presented in increasing intervals for further reading. And delete it when you apply done, that I have read everything I wanted to. Perhaps I haven't read the entire text, not necessarily. But this user-controlled schedule. I can neglect it. I'll let SuperMemo decide, but usually I have more control. And unlike the item, the flashcard is presented algorithmically, following space repetition algorithm. Therefore, it will calculate when it's the best to see it just before I forget it, so I keep it in my long-term memory with the fewer number of repetitions, and could be that I do it later because I have information overflow. A concept may not be reviewed. Usually you don't. That's why we will see in a dedicated section for concepts, which the mastery has about 100 videos, by the way. There are like 6 or 7 ways, or if you really stretch it, 8 ways to create concepts in SuperMemo, and most of them are already dismissed. So they don't take part of the review process. But if it's memorized, it will be reviewed and behaves like a topic for passive exploration. Could be the case of SuperMemo that I have this topic, I have this as a concept with content, and perhaps there are links to something I want to import that it will be added in the same concept group, let's say. There are some flows that we will see later on. And a task rarely participates in repetitions, but could also be memorized and participate. You do incremental problem solving. So when this shows up in your repetitions, you do one iteration. Or you just do it via the task list. So you will do it depending on the value, deadlines, instead of the schedule. But it's possible to do. Now that we have introduced all of the element types, we'll see the element statuses. There are a few. The first, should I say default, is what's called memorized. Memorized means that you don't remember that. No, it doesn't mean that. Means it takes part on the learning process. It's not ignored. So we have all of them. Items, they have an L. I didn't mention that because you will expect an I, because if T is topic, I item. No, it's an L. I don't know why. It's inconsistent. And the other ones, they don't even have letters. So then they don't take this as a peg. What they do, L for learning. Learning material, that is active recall. It's blue. The topic is green, task. The background is red, and the concept is orange. It's unlikely you will see this. Most of the concepts will be always in the next state. That is called dismissed. What you see here that is yellow, this means dismissed. Long story short, they are not memorized, therefore they are ignored. That's why it doesn't take part of the learning process. So all of those can be dismissed. Do you see now all of them, the background is yellow? Unlike tasks, task remains red for whatever reason, because usually task, what you will expect is to always be part of the learning process. Because if you have completed the task, you delete the task, right? It's not on the standby, I guess. So just to let you know that it doesn't change the color. Nice. There's another state called pending. And let's force it. No worries what I'm doing. We will see the actions I'm doing. Now it's not the point. Now they have the color back again because they are memorized. Nice. Do you see now this pale color? But hey, the task, once again, doesn't change color. Neither the concept, in this case. It remains the same color as the dismissed. Even though it's not dismissed. It's pending. Now, if I go here, hey, it's not scheduled either. So what's the difference? Easy. There are some learning stages that we will see later. Then, why a task and a concept doesn't change color? Easy explanation. Because they are not meant to be dismissed or even pending. What's the purpose to have a concept that is pending? Absolutely none. That's why they didn't even create the icon in this color. As easy as that. So remember, the tasks, if you work with them, they won't change color. The concepts, it's either yellow or orange, orange being the memorized. Topics is green, items is blue, and they can be both yellow, dismissed, or pale blue for pending. So those are the three statuses that any item and topic can have, or to simplify, any element, even though tasks and concepts is not meant for all of them. And just to let you know that you can convert those states back and forth. So it's not something fixed, that, oh, now it's pending and it will be forever pending. Or it's memorized and it will be memorized forever. No, you can change that anytime, which we will see in the next section. Let's actually define properly what is a memorized element. You may think, before we go into details, that is the section of the official documentation. You may think first that, hey, memorized is something I have remembered, right? Something I have chosen to remember and it's on my schedule. That's not the definition. It's perhaps not the best name because it gets to this confusion. So an element, a memorized element, is an element that takes part in the learning process. Therefore, it is repeated in intervals suggested by SuperMemo. So when we click Learn and start learning, we will see, by the way, memorized elements can be anything of those 4 element types, as long as they are memorized. So what do you mean a topic is memorized or a task is memorized? Doesn't mean I remember this. It will make sense if it's an item, because an item is for active recall, right? It only means takes part of the learning process. In other words, it is scheduled. Yet again, with other words, that is not ignored or forgotten. If you come from Anki, it will be everything that is not suspended, in color yellow usually. Meaning that if it's scheduled, not today necessarily, not tomorrow, but eventually it will become outstanding and you will see it. That means memorized. Then you can have the status that we will see, dismissed and pending. So we can also describe, it will make more sense later in the upcoming videos, that memorized elements are the elements that are not pending or dismissed, like in Anki, are not suspended. So remember, when SuperMemo says memorized elements, and you in the settings, here you go, memorized topics, that's not the topics I remember, are the topics that are being scheduled. So we could say scheduled elements instead of memorized elements, if this helps. So that is key. The key takeaway is that memorized doesn't mean remembered. as many people think. This is one of the states, and it's not necessarily permanent. For items, usually will be the case, albeit still not necessarily. So now it's time to introduce the third stage of an element, and it's a pending stage. Means it's awaiting memorization in the pending queue. So first, a pending element is always this color, this shade of blue. Can be topics as well, it's not limited to items, but usually you will do it for items, albeit not limited. But the fact is that, hey, it's in the pending queue. It's not in my outstanding queue or my priority queue either. It is in a different queue. Like, imagine this in a limbo. So it's ignored because it's a limbo, but it can get directly to my priority queue without me taking action. Just by using SuperMemo, I advance the material, you will see later on. There are some stages, the new material stage. Here you go. Then I will feed elements from the pending queue. It's the only difference, it's a tiny difference compared to dismissed, because dismissed is going to still be ignored. Dismissed, the yellow, always ignored, the blue, the pending, ignore until I don't do new content. And as always, as a SuperMemo user, you have a lot of power, so you can modify the state anytime, one by one, many at the same time in bulk, and so on. There's a lot of features relating to the pending queue. It works differently. Just to let you know that this will be only on the mastery track, because the usage now it's fading, because in incremental loading you don't need that flow, and the flows involving pending queue is because you import material, you bypass the incremental loading, or you repurpose the pending queue for something else. That we will see in this course, not in this section, but on this course, when it's pertinent, but only on the mastery path. So for now, for you, if you are in the Fluent, just knowing the existence of the pending element on the pending queue, that's all you need to know. They exist, but you're not going to use them at all. Not required for Fluency. So those are the three stages: memorized, dismissed, and pending. And you have this color-coded in the knowledge tree. So now, what is a dismissed element in SuperMemo? We know already that a dismissed element means it's not memorized, meaning it's not remembered. No. Meaning it doesn't take part on the learning process. So I will never see it unless I go to search for it or click in the knowledge tree. I'm not going to see it, but it's still there. I haven't deleted. So according to the official documentation, an element is dismissed if this element is not memorized and is ignored in the learning process. And on top of that, it's not kept in the pending queue. Why? Because pending queue means it's pending. It's yet another state that elements can have. Then we will see that a dismissed element can be reintroduced, all of this, but no worries. It's just a big difference, especially if you come from Anki, that you have regular flashcard and suspended flashcard, and that's about it. And suspended is a toggle. So in SuperMemo, you have two extra. It's dismissed, actually it's the same color, it's yellow, but you also have the pending. Like, do you see this item? This is pending. So you have two, and there's some more complexity or where this is stored that, hey, I'm in the pending queue instead of being just dismissed. I don't appear necessarily in the repetitions unless you change the learning stage, then I can appear. So there's a lot more nuisance than in Anki. But long story short, for now, dismissed element means it's yellow, it's ignored, doesn't take place in the learning unless I take some action. I need to change the state to other than dismissed in order to see it once again. That is a key difference with pending that we will see. So that's all you need to know about these missed elements. You also have here the stats and so on. It's not just a small detail. It makes, even if it's categorical from the user perspective, it makes quite a lot of difference. We will see later on in this section. But that is all you need to know for now. So it's time to introduce what's called the priority queue in SuperMemo. It's very likely that you may have already heard about the priority queue because it's the most important queue. And should we say that everything in SuperMemo is in this queue? So even if you say that, oh yeah, we have pending elements or dismissed and so on, they still have priority. If I go to View and Priority Queue, I will see how many elements. 62,190. How many elements are in my collection? Exact same number, the total. Meaning this is proof that everything in SuperMemo is in fact inside the priority queue. Some of the times could be just ignored, like the dismissed, but are still there for a reason. Just to simplify that, as you will see, there are multiple queues. They are differently for the user, but how it's built with SuperMemo in the code base is still inside the priority queue. Even if for the user it's qualitatively on its own. On the code is one entire thing. And if you noticed, you can sort it by priority. So I will see from the most important element on this collection to the least one. Do you see? Now each element is more or less 0.002 or 0.0001%. Depends on how many elements you have in your collection. So now we know this queue. And it's a queue, meaning that every single element you see in the knowledge tree in your collection, there's one specific place in the priority queue and cannot be two on the same place, in the same position. It's a queue. So basically the priority queue is telling this element is more important than this other, and this other than this third, and so on. And this will be really, really relevant to combat, to live with information upload. But that is everything we need to know for now. Let's introduce the outstanding queue in SuperMemo. The outstanding queue is a subset of the priority queue, and in the main menu we can go to View and Outstanding. It doesn't say outstanding queue, but it's a queue. And here I will see everything that is outstanding. Being outstanding means being due. It's for review. Then this queue will have what become outstanding today and in the past if I haven't finished my repetitions. Do you see the date? It's June 13th, but then I have 18th, which is my today, the time of the recording. But if I sort by this, I will have other dates, and if you see in the caption of the title, I have 6 days before the June 12th. That's very minor, and it's because I applied some postponing features to make this more clear. Could be the case that you have outstanding for years if you don't use auto postpone, as we will see later on in the course. Just to let you know that this is what you have outstanding today, and it's the same thing that appears on the stats window. So in this case I have 600, and it's the same that we have in the stats. So this queue will have outstanding elements of any type, items, topics, memorized concepts and tasks, if you use them. And we will see that in the statistics or in the status bar, it shows this with multiple counts, so it doesn't group that and stuff like this. But it's quite simple. We will see this in the upcoming videos. But that is enough for now. Remember, outstanding queue for what is outstanding in the collection, not necessarily today. So now we know the outstanding queue. Now the question is, what actually enters the outstanding queue, because it's a dynamic list, and one can be there. Perhaps it doesn't happen genuinely, but the user can override and put it there, which is also true. So we have seen already something that we will see later on, the calendar. So today, 95 items and 20 topics become outstanding. But why I have 600 items outstanding? That is because I didn't did anything in the previous days. Just because this is a backup, basically. So we already know that is what becomes outstanding today and in the past that didn't finish. This stays in the outstanding queue. It says items and topics, but remember that in many places in the UI, topics means non-items, non-item element types, so topics, tasks, and memorized concepts. But is that it? No, there's still something more. We can artificially add elements in the outstanding queue without being outstanding. So they are in the outstanding queue here without being the date of the review of today or in the past. Can be in the future. Yes, we will see later on why it is useful, in which scenarios you may use it, and so on. But this is only now to focus on what can be entered, because it's different from what? From the neural queue, or, as we will see, the drill queue. So we will know the criteria that they use, because remember that everything in SuperMemo is in the priority queue. Everything. If it exists, it's in the priority queue. That means that we can put something on the priority queue that is not on the outstanding queue. Boom, we force it. And we will be able to tell this difference if it was forced, it was not organic to be in the outstanding queue, by the count, how SuperMemo represents those counts. We'll see this later on. So let's focus once again in the status bar, more precisely on the progress bar. There are different colors, it's color coding and so on, but before this, let's focus just on the percentage. In this case, it's 13%. It's hard to see, but the color is aqua, it's like the sky blue. It's the same color as the pending, if you remember. Then, in this case, it's 13% of what? 13% of the outstanding queue. Meaning that, hey, I have progressed already 13 of what was scheduled as outstanding. That doesn't mean that this 13 is what I actually did. It's what I did, so what I reviewed, the reps I have done, what has been postponed or auto-postponed, if you use auto-postpone. So this already takes into account the percentage. Let's actually do this. So we'll go to learn and postpone. I will activate the auto-postpone. Let's see how much. Do you see? Hey, now I have 15.3%. I haven't done any other repetition myself. It's because it also takes into account what you delay. That, hey, it was scheduled for today, it has been postponed, so it's no longer outstanding. It will be outstanding in the future, but I still count it towards today, because this is the percentage out of this one. Remember, in my case, it's 32,726. This count is what was outstanding at the beginning of the day. Even if you have auto-postpone, once you open the SuperMemo for the first time today, you will have what's called the day cutoff, starts a new day, and will execute auto-postpone. So even if you auto-postpone several thousands or whatever, this will be counted towards this count, this percentage. It's always the same color. So even if you are very close to 100%, it will be still the pending or the sky blue color. And it has a precision of 1 decimal. So you have a lot of items. It will be the case that you spend 10 minutes and it's still the same percentage. Now that we know the outstanding queue and the final real queue, or just real queue, Now it's time for one of the components in the status bar. This is what's called the outstanding panel. It's from the left is the second, this one here. So this has some numbers. You don't necessarily see everything, depends on what you do. So let's focus first. The 10,000 and something, these are items. How many items are outstanding? In this backup, I have 14,000. We can see that here because this is the memorized panel we have seen already. So out of the 12,324, 10,263 are outstanding today, or they become outstanding in the past and are still waiting. So most of the items of this collection. Then you have the plus, and we have another number. This number is the same, but for topics. How many outstanding topics I have in this backup? 22,668 out of 21,472. What on earth? That doesn't add up, right? How come the outstanding number is higher than the memorized? That's because something you can do in SuperMemo, I actually did it for other videos, is that you can add to the outstanding manually. Okay, so no worries now about this. And then we have a third count. This count could be the case that you don't see it. Why? Because this count, in this case 50, is for items. They are in the final drill. If you don't use the final drill, you just skip it, you don't have that plus 50. You will have only two counts. Okay. Then we have a dash and 32,682. And as the hint says, is the total number of outstanding elements at the beginning of the day. Beginning of the day, because across the day, it will diminish. If I do repetitions of outstanding items or topics, it will decrease. But the quantity will be fixed because that is the amount, the number of elements that were outstanding today after the day cut off. But I can also do the opposite and manually add elements to the outstanding queue. If I do that, then it will show the count slightly different. So let me actually do this. I will just go by memorized, last rep. Okay, nice. Then I'm not going to explain exactly what I did. I just cheated my way here and I artificially added elements in the outstanding queue without being outstanding. We will cover that in a much later section of the course. But what's interesting now is look at the count. So we have the same numbers as before, but now I have one in parentheses, 32,675, and then the dash and the total count. So it looks very similar, but I have 100 items less, precisely 100. Why you have this extra, the fourth count in parentheses here, is because I modified artificially the outstanding queue. So this is the most complete case that you can have up to 5 counts in the outstanding panel. Items, topics, items in the final drill, total count adding what you did artificially, adding the outstanding queue, and the outstanding queue at the start of the day. So then, to just prove a point, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to those years, and what I'm going to do is dismiss them, or forget them, just to cheat my way out there. And do you see that it updates every single time? In real time, actually. Okay. So 4,000 and something conversions done. So now, hey, I had 50 items in the final drill. Now I only have 39. Yep, because I just forgot them. So then they are in the pending queue now. But what hasn't changed is the last number, because the last number is how we started the day, regardless of what I do. What I artificially add and why I artificially remove from the outstanding queue. Remember, what I just did is just for illustrative purposes. I'm not going to do it in a regular session because what I do affects the scheduling. I'm forgetting everything there. I'm going to lose the intervals, the priorities, and stuff like that. That's why you can do something that is just temporary for today, so tomorrow will be as nothing had happened and so on. We will see this on the rescheduling options in SuperMemo in their dedicated section, not now. Now it was just to showcase that, so it's more complete. I now skip the final drill. Do you see now? Hey, where's the third count? The plus 50 or plus 39 that I had, it's gone. That is because now I don't have the final drill. Easy. One last detail is that if we compare with the statistics window, you will see in the outstanding the same thing. Exactly the same numbers, but the latest one. So, how many elements were outstanding at the start of the day? Today, it's only shown at the status bar. Nowhere else. It's just this tiny detail. Everything else is shared in the outstanding row in the statistics window. So this is just one tiny detail of what could be the mastery path in case you are watching this video from the Fluency path, because I thought it didn't deserve its own video just for that, this detail. So I included all-encompassing everything about this panel in one single video. That's why it's longer than usual. And there's some other details that usually in the Fluency I don't cover. At least it's some example that a taste you can get in the mastery. So let's continue focusing on the status bar, more specifically the progress bar. And now we will focus on the color coding. So we know already we have 15.3% of progress. So what was scheduled today? We have seen or postponed 15% of that, but all is blue. What means blue? That has been reviewed. If there are non-item element types, topics, tasks, unmemorized concepts, which it will be anecdotal, but it's still inside, they will be blue because you can only do the rep and move on. But in items you have show answer and you can grade your recall. If you fail or you put 3, so 0, 1, 2, or so if you decide a grade of 3 or worse, then this will go red. It's super simple because that means that whatever goes to the final drill will be red and whatever else will be blue. My collection is too large to have something meaningful. So let me go to a different place. Now it's 0%. Do you see? Awesome. But I only have, in my case, 12 topics. I don't have more counts because I don't have the final drill and I haven't added myself anything to the outstanding queue. Awesome. So next rep. Do you see now it's 16%, 25, 33, pam, pam, 50. Super quickly I go to 100%. And nothing more to learn because I have achieved 100% of progress. Makes total sense. Okay. Let's go to a different one. Presidents of the US. This says 100%. Done. How come? I did nothing today. It's because there's nothing to do. Why? Because everything is pending. So in that case, it's possible to have 100% of progress with everything white. The color white, we haven't addressed it explicitly, means that it's pending it's waiting. Red has been reviewed and failed. Or 3, which is a passing grade. So it goes to the final rail, or has the capacity to go to final rail, because you can disable the final rail. And even if you have disabled it, it will be shown as red. Then you have the blue, what you have done. That doesn't go to the final rel. And what is still remaining is white. This is the outlier case that everything is white with 100% because the outstanding queue is empty. If we go to that stage, it's actually grayed out. There's nothing. But if I go to new material, so I start learning from the pending queue, what's going to happen? Now it's blue. Why on earth is blue? Because now it's out of 1. Do you see the last count now is no longer 0? How come? It's because, aesthetically speaking, undoing the repetition, it's something that is not outstanding because it's the pending queue, but they have done the repetition today. Therefore, counts as outstanding for a split second because this will have an interval. Let me actually check that out. In this case, it's 3 days. So for a split second comes the outstanding queue because it becomes memorized, but then SuperMemo applies an interval, therefore it's no longer outstanding, but it's memorized, continues to be memorized. That is why it's added here. Awesome. So if I continue, oh, what happened now? It's 50%. Why the other one is red? It's because I press enter or space, this equals to number 3. And even if it's a successful recall, great, it goes to the final rel. And now you see the count here. We have a third count we hadn't had before. And that is the final rel count. So I have 0 items, 0 topics, and 1 item in the final rel, out of 2 that have been outstanding. Hope this makes sense. Another one, and another one, 25, and now it will be at 20%. Do you get it? Now, if I do success, from now on, I'm going up. Because those, shortcut number 5 is the easiest, that doesn't go to the final rel. But I'm not going to get 100% unless I finish all of the pending queue. Awesome. So to wrap up, if I go back to my backup of my genuine collection, now what happens? 13.3, I do some reps, let me fail it. I actually fail, but it's not enough. So I will need to fail quite a lot of cards, of items, to appreciate some pixels of red or the percentage to go up. So I will smash. Do you see it's still 0.3? 0.4 finally. That's why once you have a lot of material on your collection, this is no longer useful because it will stay very close to the same number. At most, after a long while, it will change 1 decimal. Blah, right? Unless you use auto postpone. But that's a story for other videos. Hope this makes sense. Remember, there are only 3 colors: blue, red, and white. And it's just to have some degree of, you pick there, okay, I get the estimation, but later on it's not that useful. So now it's time to introduce what's called the pending queue. In this collection, we already know we have some pending elements. Here we go. 3,131. If we go to, in the main menu, view, hey, there's no pending queue at all. Yeah, we need to go to other, and here you go, pending. Why it's there is because it's not enforced. This was the thing when SuperMemo lacked incremental reading. So it's been 25 years that the pending queue, yes, you can use it, it's not required, and most of the time, and included in this course, we're going to repurpose this queue. But basically, it's the queue that contains all of the pending elements. As easy as that. Then, the order of this queue doesn't go by priority. Now it's like this. It looks like this because I sorted by priority. I can sort alphabetically if I want. That's a key difference with the priority queue, because this is FIFO, first in, first out. When you send an item or a topic to the pending queue, it will be added to the very last one, at the very bottom. So the next one you do, it will become the last, so that, let's say this one. Oh man, that's not friendly for YouTube. Let's pretend it's this one. Oh my god. Okay. Sorry about that, I just don't want to go into the topic of Second World War. Imagine it's this, then it will shift one position. And when you do a repetition, therefore, when you do the new material, stage new material, you start from the absolute top of the queue, which again is not the best title. Oh my god. So you will be getting this, pam 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 pam, from the top, and when you add elements, you add from the bottom. But in SuperMemo, you have absolute power. You can set in any position, you can reset, move things around, move it from a different queue. So many things you can do in SuperMemo. For now, we just know what is the pending queue, how to access that queue, and the basics. In the mastery track, we will see most of the stuff you can do with it, and how you can repurpose it. But for the fluency, that's enough. You know it exists, why it existed before, and why you shouldn't care much, at least if you want to do basic stuff in SuperMemo. So it's time to introduce what's called the drill queue, or the final drill queue, if you prefer this name, because it's for the final drill. So the stage, 3 stages, is the final drill, which is optional. We'll have a dedicated section for the mastery track about the final drill, not for the fluency. So if we go to the main menu, View, Other, and Drill, hey, it's grayed out. How is that possible? It's because in this collection, it's a backup, and what happened is that in the last week, I didn't do any repetition. And that is a key factor, because the final drill is for the items you have reviewed recently, and you have failed. Well, 1, 2, or 3. Up to 3 in the recall. I don't recall any item, that's why it's empty. So now if I fail, 1, 2, 3, okay, that will be enough. Now, View, Other, and Drill, now it's not empty. Do you see? I have lapsed all of those elements, by the way. And spoiler alert, look at the interval. You can have 6-day interval after lapsing. We will see this later on the space repetition and algorithm section of the course. But this is the final drill. Can only be items, because you can only recall grid recall in items. And here there's one tiny detail in SuperMemo 19. Just to let you know that when you enter the final drill, before it get in buckets of 5 items, from SuperMemo 19 it's every single one. It's more random, let's say, and you can have more repetition of one item. I mentioned this because it's the only thing that changed, and because in the fluency we're not going to cover anything else about the final drill. In the mastery, we will see what enters the final drill, what quits the final drill, the use cases, the operations, the final drill operations. There's quite a lot of sauce. But for now, we only needed to introduce it. Now you know what's the drill queue. And to make it more to express it in different words, the final drill can only be somewhat a subset of the outstanding. But once you do the repetition, those elements are no longer outstanding. So strictly speaking, at some degree is a subset of the outstanding queue, then it leaves the outstanding queue to become in the drill queue. And can be at both times, on the final drill queue and in the priority queue. So this is a very big difference. It doesn't shift queues. It's being added to an extra queue. Now we're going to use a queue that is harder to see, and it's called the subset queue. We're going to focus on subsets later on the course. Now we're just presenting the queue so you know all of the queues, but no worries about, oh, what is a subset, all of this. Because first, we're going to cover this later on in the course, and it's so massive that there are more than 3 dedicated sections for just subsets. Subsets, subset review, and subset operations. 3 sections with more than 100 videos overall. It's a big deal. So for now, what is this queue? If we go to view, okay, outstanding, we have seen that. Priority queue, we have seen that. Pending and drill. Where's this queue? It's because it's temporary and arbitrary, can be anything. It means it's a subset, it's a fraction of your collection, meaning it will be a fraction of the priority queue. But arbitrary doesn't have to be outstanding, doesn't have to be pending, or doesn't have to be in the drill queue, which could be even the 3 at the same time if you really want. Okay, so then if I go to my SuperMemo course here, and I start what's called a subset review, no worries about this now. Okay, now here I have in the review, in the stats window, the review section, I have 16 topics. Why? Because most of the things are dismissed already. So there's not much memorized that can be outstanding, right? So this is the what? It's the subset queue. In this case, only contains 16 elements, but can be arbitrarily large, like almost your collection. View, if you click, view subset, content selection. So that's it. That's the same queue. So this will be a subset queue that it just tells you, hey, from this collection, I have those elements using the element number, by the way, those here, and in this order. We will see later that you can modify the order, how you can trigger the subsets, create the subsets, do operations between them. It's a lot. It's crazy the features there are for subsets. In the beginning, you realize, hey, this queue is not even, I don't care, right? Which I do agree with you. Why should I care when there's even no last option, direct option for that? But as your collection grows, you rely more on subsets, to the point that you will be relying on that queue virtually every single day. At least once a session, you will use it. It's really relevant. We're going to focus now on the neural queue. We have seen most of the queues already, not all of them. This one, neural queue, is what? How come I already have a neural queue if I didn't go neural first? We'll see later on what is this. But the neural queue is for the neural review. The same that the drill queue is for the final drill, right? So this is also dynamic, like the subset is dynamic, can be anything, but goes beyond that because as you're executing, going through this queue, it is updated. So you don't reach the end and that's it. Before you reach the end, it gets renewed every single time. You will reach the end if your collection is very tiny. Okay, so now if I go, I will see later on, in a dedicated section, I'll go neural. Then what I have already is a queue. In this case, 155 elements. And I can also see that here. in the review section of the statistics window. It just tells me the number. For this purpose, doesn't actually differentiate items and topics, unlike the outstanding queue or the subset queue. So now you know what is this queue, and much later, after we have seen everything for about incremental reading, we will cover the neural queue. We have seen some of the queues in SuperMemo: the outstanding, the priority, pending, drill, subset, neural. And is there something else? Something still there? Yes. There is a queue that usually you don't say queue, even though it exists, and it's the random queue. One of the things, by the way, in the mastery track, we will have a dedicated section for the random features, which is more than you may think of. Oh, it's just random like Wikipedia. Let me go to random page. No, it's a lot more than that. So you're not going to see this in the Fluency track, but if I go to random learning, I get any arbitrary element in my collection. This is actually pending. Yes, you can get pending or even dismissed. Yes, you can get dismissed elements. We have said that dismissed elements are always ignored, but the random can also ignore that. But the random has some features that you can include or just target the dismissed if you really want to. So you only get dismissed elements. But this is not the topic of this video. Now you have this random 3130 elements. This is what? It's a queue. Usually random, you'll do just a few and so on, if you really use this feature. But if you want a session, that's what I'm doing now. You see, now it decreased by 1. So this is the, let's say, most obscure queue you will ever see in SuperMemo, the random queue. And it's the only queue which during the learning can include dismissed elements. Yeah, an exception to the exceptions. Remember that SuperMemo has a lot of stuff that overrules the standards and some other that overrules the overruler, stuff like this. So let's review all of the queues we have seen that there are in SuperMemo. Even if it's too soon, like for the neural queue, it's still worth having just the overview. Okay. So we have said that everything in SuperMemo is in the priority queue, even though some part will be the dismissed, what we have here in yellow, that is ignored. SuperMemo will never show that to you while learning, but it still has a priority. It sets the priority to 100%, but is still valid. The priority is being used and is unique in the priority queue. Awesome. We also have a subset of this that is the pending queue, which are the elements which state are pending. They have been set for get option, or they are natively pending through an import. If you import Anki cards or stuff like that. Even though for us, qualitatively, is different, for SuperMemo, that's on the same place. It's a priority queue. So for SuperMemo, that is like this. It will be here. Awesome. Then we have the outstanding queue. What is scheduled for review today or in the past, or has been manually added in the outstanding by the user. Again, this is a subset. It could be more or less this part, right? But for us, exists on its own. No, that is a queue on its own. It's a subset of the priority queue. So therefore, it will be smaller. And it's distinct because the outstanding cannot be overlapping with the pending queue, because the outstanding already implies is memorized. Could have memorized elements. This would be more or less this empty space. This empty space will be the memorized elements that are not outstanding, because we have the dismissed already, the pending, and the outstanding. Okay. So I can force some of them here to be inside here by the user. that, hey, it's not outstanding, but I want to be in the outstanding queue for whatever reason. So far, so good. We still have more queues. We have the drill queue. Usually, as I already hinted in its own dedicated video, the final drill queue usually is not outstanding, because at the moment you do the repetition, it has a new interval. Even if you lapse it, it will be tomorrow. At the very least, it will be tomorrow. Therefore, today is no longer outstanding. But the final drill, we will see later on in more detail in the mastery track. It's not just today. It's the day before and the day before. You can have up to 3 days in the pending queue. That means that if today I have failed some items and are scheduled for tomorrow, and tomorrow I do review those, and tomorrow I do another session, but let's say I do some topic reviews, not any items, what's going to happen? That this item is yet to be reviewed, so it's still on the outstanding, and could be still on the final drill queue, or I can just add it manually. That means why there's some overlap here is that some element, well, items, because the final drill has to be an item, could be in 3 queues at the same time. In the priority queue, in the outstanding queue, and in the drill queue. Hope this makes sense. Even though the drill queue is temporary. And the outstanding, it's temporary by definition, but in SuperMemo, in incremental reading, this temporariness can take up to forever. Awesome. Let's continue. We have the neural queue. When you go neural, neural can get elements which are outstanding, or not outstanding, so this white space or the green space. But yeah, you can also get pending. So you can get elements which are in the pending queue, totally valid. Then, strictly speaking, if we're really precise, let me show you one example. If I go to my neural queue, you will see, oh, that's a massive good case. You see dismissed elements. So the dismissed elements enter the queue, but are never shown, but are still being used for crawling, for what's called the spreading activation. So when you navigate links through the collection, it doesn't matter if it's dismissed, because it could be just a folder. You still use it to navigate the links. No worries about the specifics, because we'll cover this later on. But just to let you know that, strictly speaking, the neural queue could be like this, because it covers the dismissed elements, even though are not ever seen. That's why I don't put them. Enter the queue, but are never executed, and never reviewed. Awesome. And from the other part, hey, it's overlapping with the final drill, yes? So in other words, during the neural review, you can get elements from outstanding or not, pending or not, dismissed, they will be crawled, and even in the final drill. Could be the case. And we have yet another one, the subset queue. The subset is arbitrary. Could be by criteria. You do a search, whatever is in the search. Or you do by a branch in your tree. Or you could do a subset of the outstanding. And then the outstanding, I filter just items. Boom. No. Items that have more than repetition, are never lapsed. The first repetition was in this year, that I can customize the filter the criteria. But can be anything. Subset queue can also have pending items. Well, pending elements. But not dismissed. The dismissed will be completely ignored. So more or less, it's all encompassing as the neural queue. That doesn't mean it will have everything. It has the potential to have any single element in the priority queue, but the dismissed. And we could have said, hey, we're done. Well, very strictly speaking, there's another queue, the random queue, as shown in the previous video, and it will be everything. including the dismissed. Random queue can have any single element in your collection, regardless of the state. If it's outstanding or not, if it's pending, dismissed, memorized, it doesn't matter. You can target that. But the random queue is temporary. It only exists while you do this random review, and as soon as you move on, it disappears. The priority queue is constant. So at the end of the day, the only queue that doesn't depend on time, on context of what you do, like the random, there's only one. Priority queue. If I use SuperMemo, or I don't use it for a month, nothing will change. Perhaps it will become outstanding, some elements, but there will still be in the priority queue. The final drill will become empty. And I didn't start a new review or a subset review, so the queues will be empty. Or will have whatever the last time I did, they will have the contents. A most important queue in SuperMemo, the absolute boss, is the priority queue. If you only have to choose one, it will be the priority queue, and neglect everything else. Hope this review made sense, at least by the position, some of them. And once we go to the subset reviews, neural queues, and so on, it will make more sense once you know why they are useful, how they work, and so on. But I still wanted to push, let's say, the big picture first. It's time to introduce what's called the SuperMemo commander. And the SuperMemo commander just contains commands, so features you can trigger. So we have seen a lot of menus already. There's a lot to unpack still from here, but there's still more. Okay, so how we can trigger the commander? I suggest the key binding, which is Ctrl-Enter. Okay. Then we have two columns, which are at the start they are the same. Usually the purpose is that you can have low frequency features or commands, like alarm, email, paste. This is obscure already, right? Deprecate article, dismember. You don't do this often, right? So at least you have this menu to quickly navigate to those. Then this list has changed across time. So depending on the precise version you use of SuperMemo, this might change a little. And if you ask me, it will be nice if you could customize that, because the selection, it's very subjective. There are some features that I never use, or I use, but I don't rely on the commander, because they can be done. There's a key binding. Why do I want this, right? Or ancestors, also key binding. And some other features that are frequently used by me are not there. So usually what they say, the example is a split, SP. It will be one of the most high yield commands you will use in this window, most of the time. And just to let you know that you can customize your name. So you can search, like I just did. I filter as SP. Now there's only one candidate. And I can make my own, as we will see. For instance, done, rename. Now it just exclamation mark. If instead of searching here, I search here in the custom name, just with exclamation point, I already have it. Because if I do done, there are more candidates, right? So you can make it your own if you want to rely on this. But if you use the hotkey scripts, which we will have in the mastery track later, that's only for that. And in case, oh man, I want to restore the defaults, you click on default, and that's it. And now I have a bug, which a window appeared, but is not rendered. It's not in my secondary screen either. I just accepted the dialog without being present. This could be the case for you. This is very low frequency use. It's arcane. So even if this bug is reported, it's not going to be fixed. as many they have been. So remember, from now on, every time that I say SuperMemo Commander, it's Control space and I refer to this. For this course, I will always use the defaults. I'm not going to use any custom name, so it's easier to follow. So that's everything you need to know for now about the SuperMemo Commander. See you incrementally.